Hello and welcome to FormFest 2023. I'm Marlena Medford, Senior Director of Strategic Communications at Code for America.
And I'm Kirsten Wyatt, a fellow at the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University, where I lead our digital service network. And we are so excited to be your MCs today.
Yes, we have got an incredible lineup representing every level of government from around the world. In fact, to our knowledge, this is the first ever international gathering of government leaders all coming together to celebrate and explore how forms can make public services more accessible, efficient, and equitable.
And given that we're gathering from places around the globe, we encourage you to visit native-land.ca to recognize the Indigenous people, languages, and treaties associated with your local area. We gratefully acknowledge the Indigenous peoples on whose ancestral homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Indigenous communities who make their homes here today. Throughout the day, we'll be asking our speakers to share their formative form stories. So I have to ask that question of you, Marlena.
Yeah, for me, it's been about a decade since I worked in local government. But when I did, I remember that we had a speaker form that people had to physically come to City Hall and fill out a speaker form if they wanted to speak during a city council meeting and have their voices heard, have their opinions put into the public record. So we put that form online, and as a result, it made it much, much easier for people to be civically engaged, and we heard from a much, much larger portion of the community, and I think we had better outcomes because of it. So I love that form story because I think it really articulates how forms can make for better civic engagement. So now I have to put it back on you, Kirsten. What is your formative form story?
Well, I recently had a delightful form experience when I was applying for my real ID with the Oregon DMV. And the online process was so easy and so intuitive. The fields that they asked on the form were easy to respond to. And I actually sent the Oregon DMV administrator a thank you note because the work was so well done. And that's really what today is all about, is recognizing and celebrating the humble form and the difference it can make in building trust in government and access to government services.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's that sentiment right there that inspired so many in our civic tech community to show up today.
Yep, absolutely. And today's event wouldn't be possible without our help from our friends from innovative public interest technology organizations. And you'll have a chance to meet some of them later today as they're moderating sessions. So huge thanks to the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation at Johns Hopkins University, Coding It Forward, Metro Lab Network, Tech Talent Project, Technologists for the Public Good, and the U.S. Digital Response.
Yes, absolutely. Major thanks to all of our partners. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our opening speakers, Code for America CEO Amanda Renteria and Beeck Center Executive Director Lynn Overmann. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you, you two. I'm just jealous that I'm not in the same room with you two and with Lynn. It's fantastic. Fantastic to be here. I'm Amanda Renteria, she, her pronouns, and I am super excited to be here today to welcome you all to this conversation. As I was thinking about it, I find words that have dual purposes really interesting. So when you think about form, right, it could be a noun where it's a form of something, or it could be a verb where we are forming, creating something together. And so as I thought about what we are doing today, not only are we talking about the forms that are out there in static form, but we're also together forming something pretty cool, which is this conversation of how can we form the perfect forms? So with that, I welcome you. And Lynn, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. And it is absolutely wonderful to see all of the folks signing in on the chat and all of the different places that you're from. And I am recognizing from some friends in the family, and excited to expand this family to include everyone who is as nerdily excited about forms as I am. So I am Lynn Overmann. I am the Executive Director of the Beeck Center for Social Impact at Georgetown University, where we are the proud home of the Digital Services Network. And we are just beyond thrilled to co-host this event with Code for America. And will say personally particularly pleased to be here with my good friend Amanda. I will say in many ways, good forms are government's love language to the public. And I could not be more excited to be here today to learn more from experts from across the globe about how they are making the work of government better, one form at a time.
So one of the things that excites me about being here is really everyone who showed up, just like you said, Lynn. I want to mention there's about 1,800 people registered today. Shout out to the 5 countries that are presenting forums from around the world, UK, Canada, France, New Zealand, and of course, the United States. Sessions are being led by every level of government, city, county, state, and federal. And I also know we have a bunch of attendees who don't necessarily work in government, but at civic tech organizations and other companies that partner with government. This all speaks to the importance of forums as a foundational tool that we all work with every day to help. And really, the idea is, how can we help government serve people better? So for a bit of background, FormFest was inspired by the entire civic tech community, many of the people who are joining us today. And what we did is we actually spotted a trend in our summit proposals about forums, which told us this was something that the community really wanted to dive deeper in. And so hence FormFest was born.
That's right, Amanda. And events like this, with their strong focus on the critical role that forum design can play in increasing equity and accessibility, really demonstrates how our movement continues to grow. And I will say this amazing turnout reflects a key reality that in many circumstances, a government forum is the first thing a member of the public sees when they are looking for help. And while both of our organizations often work on deeply complex and highly technical government challenges, especially around public access to benefits, we also know that something as simple as a forum can have major impacts on how people experience and access government services. As leaders in this work, we at the Beeck Center and Code for America are thrilled to be partnering to make space for this kind of collective learning. Government organizations large and small and from across the world will present today about their use of forums, whether it's park picnic shelter permits in California or safety net benefits right here in DC. Government forum design and delivery unites all of us who work in public service.
Couldn't agree more. And, when I think about forums, they're a critical gateway to services, a touch point for virtually every interaction with government at every level. And every one of us has filled out a government form, many government forms. And unfortunately, some of us have less than ideal experiences, which, Lynn, brings me to my first question, which is, tell me your formative forum story.
Well, Amanda, as you know, and some of my friends on this line know, I am the proud parent of 4 children, and we have sent all of our kids to DC public schools. And while I will say that things have started to get better from a digitization perspective, for many years, we had to fill out a lengthy packet of paper forms every year for every kid. And the only way to get those forms in was to actually physically go to the school in person. And I will say that there was one year when all 4 of our kids went to 4 different schools. So I clocked a lot of time going from school to school to school. And while it was fantastic to be able to engage with the DCPS employees who were wonderful, it was a little bit of a forum marathon. But Amanda, I'd love to hear from you. What is your formative forum story?
So I have to admit, I was one of those kids that filled out Publishers Clearinghouse mail because I thought if only I could win, I could help my parents figure out a way, right, to be millionaires. And so it is like a secret that I kind of love forms from early on. But that also gave me the title in my family as the person that filled out forms for my parents, particularly my dad, whose native language is Spanish and who has trouble with spelling, things like that in English. And so I spent a lot of my childhood filling out forms for my dad, whether that was the DMV, whether that was citizenship, whether that was opening up a small business and getting a business license. And so that was sort of how I came into forums. And I really did see the way oftentimes when you're the kid and you're translating, I wouldn't ask the same question to my dad the way it was asked in English on the forums. And so I felt like I was that bridge and translator. And so, fast forward to COVID and when my parents called me, because anytime still to this day when there's a forum, it's call Amanda, let's see what happens. And so they call me and say, how do we get these tests? And I was like, Mom, it's so easy. And I was able to FaceTime with her walk her through it. And my parents are now like, number one, like when it comes out there, they're filling the form out. And so when I think about that, that trajectory from when I was filling them out for my dad to where we are now, it actually gives me a ton of hope of not only what is possible, but even seeing sort of that trust in forms for people like my parents who didn't feel like they can fill it out themselves. And so that's why I'm super excited to be here, because I can see the potential and what it actually means for real people trying to make their way through for benefits, citizenship, and everything else. So as I think about our, what we're trying to do here today, Lynn, I'm curious to hear what are the key themes you're most hopeful about that people will take away from FormFest?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Amanda, I do want to say that I am afraid you may have dated both of us, because I also very clearly remember those little postcards, and I'm not sure how many of our audience will also have that very distinct memory. And I was pretty convinced I won $1 million several times, and it turns out that that was not the case. But I want to pivot a little bit from the point that you made in your form experience, Amanda, because I do think accessibility is a really critical part of how we think about forms. And I know that a lot of the sessions today are touching very much on that. So there's all kinds of different levels of accessibility, and language accessibility is really a critical and key component. But I will say, I kind of looked at the sessions that are coming up, and I geeked out a fair amount. And I do want to call out a few of them in particular, because looking at what's coming down the pike is really what's making me most hopeful. So generally speaking, I think both myself at Beeck and Code for America, we just really see the power of networks and best practices and bringing people together to share best practices so that we can learn from each other and build off of each other's great works. But I will say, sitting at an academic institution, I do feel a little bit of an obligation to call out how important data and research is to helping designers improve their forms to meet the full range of community needs. And in fact, I did eyeball a great session today on how to measure administrative burden in real time. And I'm not going to tee up my friend and former USDS colleague, Mina Hsiang, but I do know that measuring administrative burden and having a tool that would help us do that back when I was in the federal government recently really would have been incredibly useful as we were trying to figure out how to get the right information while reducing burden for all of the folks that are engaging with government. So one of my hopeful outcomes from this time together today is to build and strengthen those feedback loops between researchers and form designers so that we can continue to help each other get better about delivering services. I am also particularly excited about a component of forms that may not always be top of mind, which is keeping them updated. So we can have the best design form in the world, but if it does not reflect the latest changes in rules and regulations, it doesn't meet public needs and can really create confusion and frustration. So I very much encourage folks to join the session today, where some of our very own Beeck Center experts, along with colleagues from state partners, will share how a growing community of practice is translating policy and regulatory documents into code. And that code can help keep forms up to date and reduce duplication of work in every system. So update once and populate multiple times. And finally, I will say I am most excited about the incredible mix of organizations joining us today. As Amanda, as you called out at the outset, we got this incredible combination of government decision makers, designers, civic tech enthusiasts, researchers, and frankly, a lot of form nerds like me. I have been giddily and goofily excited about this event for 4 months now. So if we can carry this coalition forward and continue to work together on making government forms the best they can be, we will be making a major impact on improving government delivery of services. But Amanda, I do want to turn back to you for one last question. Emerging technology is obviously something we are all thinking about. When you think about the future implications of that, how do you see it transforming forms?
So I know we've all talked about, I know out there in the civic tech space, there's been a whole conversation around AI and what does it mean for us as a civic tech community? What does it mean for government? Heck, what does it mean for our world? And we have spent some time now thinking about how can you use AI? How can we use it for user-friendly questions, making things easier, being that translator instead of that 10-year-old kid doing it? Data validation and error detection will be easier, making for fewer incomplete or incorrect submissions. And really like thinking through virtual assistants via chat box. I know we are in the early days at Code for America using an AI-powered chatbot to answer people's simple queries that have been making things clearer for folks, leaving our client support staff free to respond to the more complex questions or issues that pop up. And so I'm excited about really thinking, not just here we are for this moment, but recognizing that this world we are in is ever evolving. And this group here is on the front lines of thinking about that. And so what makes me excited is when I think about the FormFest today, and what does this look like a year from now? What are the tools? How have we made it better? How have we done it in a responsible kind of way? And with that, I want to just thank everyone for being here, not only to be in this conversation today, but as Lynn said, to really move forward as well. I am super excited that our teams are together doing that. And that too is really trying to role model, how can we do more of this together? How can we build together, form together? Because that really is, I think, the answer to solutions as we think about government and its people here in the United States and around the world. So just want to thank you, Lynn, for being in this journey with me, and everyone else that has joined us today.
Thank you so much, Lynn and Amanda, for setting the stage for today's event and for leading our organizations that are hosting FormFest.
Next up, we are so excited to welcome our opening keynote speaker, Mina Hsiang, Administrator of the U.S. Digital Service. Hi, Mina. Welcome to FormFest. To open things up, we'd love to hear your formative form story as part of your introduction.
Thank you so much for having me. And I will concede that I was frozen when I think you introduced me. I am joining from my government computer, and many of you have connectivity experience with that. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Just making sure. My formative experience. Could someone pull up slide 2? So in 2014, at the end of 2013, I was called to help with the rescue of healthcare.gov. And the first thing that they said was, can you help us fix the form, the front door? What is happening on the front door? And I said, sure. What questions are we asking people since the site is down? And no one could tell me what questions we were even asking the public. So I did what any self-respecting bureaucracy hacker would do. I called the call center and I signed up for health insurance, and I wrote down every question that they asked me. And I typed it up and I sent it around, and people were like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. We didn't know what we were asking. Fast forward a week to being on site, and the application is up and working in some ways, but we were in the process of building out instrumentation. And one of the things we needed, you can see, is the flow of the application. And we needed to figure out where we needed to put instrumentation so we could monitor sort of user funnel. And you can see those represented in the Post-its. And so we literally, our whole team, everybody sort of logged in and went to different parts of healthcare.gov, and we created this flow, and we printed it out and we put it on the wall so we could figure out the instrumentation. And my desk was in the hallway, and every single person from every team would come by all the time and say, hey, where did you get this? This is so helpful. And my joking answer that wasn't a joke was I went online and we printed it out. And it became clear to me that people had not lived in the shoes of their users and had not even seen the process. And that was an incredibly helpful realization. So I think, this is my formative experience, if that was the question. Thank you. You can take down that slide. But this was the beginning of my journey into the federal space and sort of all of this. And printing out those forms, helping the developers, literally the developers, understand what users were experiencing, understand where the form was working and where it wasn't, was ultimately instrumental in getting the form back online for that year, getting 12.6 million people health insurance that year. And over the last 10 years, in helping ensure that 40 million people could have health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. And the team has continued to evolve on that. So I think for me, that was a really eye-opening experience of how do you expose the people who are working on building the forms to the things that really matter for the audience, and how do we start building in the right instrumentation and feedback loops there. Taking a step back, I'm Mina Hsiang. I'm the administrator of the U.S. Digital Service. And we work across the entire federal government, partnering with agencies at all different levels of government to help them improve their services through technology and design. As you can imagine, that touches on forms quite a lot. And so I'm incredibly excited to be here and to talk to you a little bit about what we have discovered and seen over time, and to talk a little bit about both where we have seen the world go. So one of our areas of expertise is really bringing in private sector perspective and expertise into government and saying, how do we bring that level of performance and expectation to services that are critical for the public? So I'm excited to be here and to talk about that. So what is a form? I heard I enjoyed Amanda's musings. It hadn't occurred to me about the verb frame, but what is a form anyway? The invitation to come here and speak really led me to reflect quite a bit on this question and to think about both the forms that we see in government and also, my first question is always, okay, what are the non-government things that are a form and what do they look like and how are they different and how are they the same? And the first reflection I had was almost every example that I could think of a form that we fill out was government or quasi-government. So I first thought, obviously, of all the federal forms that I'm exposed to every day in my work. But then I, started thinking like, oh, you have to apply for a driver's license. Oh, wait, that's a government form. Oh, you apply for a library card. It's not like a straight up government function, but it's government related. Oh, you apply for a parking permit. All of these things are kind of government. So that was a very interesting set of thoughts. But then I started thinking about other interactions that we have in the world and the way that we have sort of replaced forms. And so I wanted to pull up some examples. So if you don't mind, slide 4. This is a form. This is very obviously a form. This is the canonical government form, right? This is the form that you use to fill out your taxes. This is probably the absolute most widely, not everybody fills it out on paper in this way, but this is the most widely used form in the country in one way or another. And, things that we can observe about this, it's static, it's one way, right? So a traditional form is static and therefore it has all of these complicated instructions to deal with what really could be dynamic content and rules-based determinations. It also is one way, which is to say, like, you fill it out, you hand it in, and you're not, it's a one-way flow of information and you will have some feedback loop, but it's asynchronous and really is just like you hand in a bunch of things and then somebody makes a decision, then it comes back to you. So I started thinking about other form experiences in life. Next slide, please. So are these also forms? Looking across sort of private sector and other contexts, right? These are also forms. They serve functions that used to be served exclusively by a one-way form like what we saw before. But the world evolves and all of these tools exist in a competitive environment. So you can see that there is an evolution of how we think about a form. So the first of these is my chart portal, and it really gives you a bunch of opportunities both to interact with your provider, to see your information, and to request services and schedule appointments in a way that used to require forms. And I remember when I used to, have to fill out a request for a lab report. The next two are things that we do all the time that is also filling out a form. One of the most common form-like experiences is buying things, which in effect is very similar to a lot of government services. And, even that has evolved. I was laughing at how appropriate it is that last week, at least on my implementation, Shopify went live with basically the elimination of forms from like millions and millions of shopping websites. So all of a sudden, so the third one here, it takes you to your Shopify cart and you actually don't have to fill out anything. You don't even have to choose which of the many different payment methods. It already has all your information. So this used to be a form, but now it's just a button click. There's nothing for you to do. And then the last one is, a conversation. So Delta has changed a huge number of things that we used to do. So this is me having a conversation initially with a chatbot, which is sort of a algorithmic system that is basically providing me with a refund for first answering a bunch of questions to direct me to the right form, and then providing me with a conversation, which in effect ends with me getting a refund for a flight, which is something that I remember going up to the Delta counter and filling out a form for. That is how we used to get those. So there's a lot of very interesting dynamics that are being incorporated here that are only possible through the use of technology, right? Things that can be prioritized for you based on what we think you will need or is appropriate or you would be eligible for. Incredibly simple, not a lot compared to the 1040 that we saw before, which had so many different boxes, really focusing your eyes on what you need to do. It's simple, and there might even be nothing for you to do. Gives you immediate feedback. So it can immediately tell you if the information you entered isn't what they're really looking for, or, in one of these cases, and in fact, in many of these cases that we will see coming up in the world, it's a conversation, right? A form is a one-way transmission of information, but what you can turn it into is how can you turn that into a conversation between both sides to help you arrive at what the right answer is. Okay, so what does this mean for government? One thing I will just last take away from this, digital forms have a lot of advantages. They allow you to prevent and mitigate errors. So you can autocorrect spelling, addresses that are wrong. If you upload a photo and the photo is not according to the specification, it can tell you in real time that you need to upload a different photo. It allows you to pre-fill and autofill. So, we have a relationship. You have been coming here as a healthcare provider for a number of years. I already know a lot of things about you. So it allows the provider of services to already say, here are the things that we already know about you. You don't have to tell me those 72 times. They're also easier for, in our case, an agency to ingest and analyze, right? An agency, a company. So you can take in that data. It doesn't require a huge facility to scan lots of forms and then do handwriting recognition and then turn that into files. So it's a very direct avenue to ingest and allows you to immediately analyze what's going on with people's experience. And they're dynamic. So it allows you to meet the user where they are. And that is relevant on so many different fronts. So Lynn talked about accessibility. Amanda talked about translation. It really allows you to, I showed the Delta thing, the Delta chat. It allows the form provider, as it were, to come up with a way to make clear to you, to make accessible to the user, to approach a user in many different ways, to offer questions that are most relevant to the user, to lead you from one set of questions to a different set of questions. So the dynamic nature just makes it easier to meet the user on many fronts. Okay, so that's like a broad look at the questions. So what does this mean for government? Government is one of the largest frontiers, full of what I referred to as these one-way forms. So a place where you just fill out a whole bunch of information and send it off into the void. And also one of the most comprehensive avenues for massive change in anyone's life experience. So the services that government provides are essential, often not optional, and critical to people at important junctures in their life. So this is like a place that really matters and a place that is ripe with opportunity. Claire likes to say a lot, and I haven't validated this, but I 1000% believe her. Only 2% of federal forms are digitized. 2%. And even of that 2%, you and I have all experienced a digitized government form that does not take advantage of many of the capabilities that I just laid out above, right? It is not dynamic. It is not interactive. It is like worse than a fillable PDF. So It is a target-rich and impact-rich environment. Again, these are critical services for millions and millions of people for things that are not optional and are really essential at important times in life. So we have been deeply engaged in work to continually bring all of the benefits that I just outlined, or some subset of those benefits, into government forum experiences to start applying them in the context, in these places where they can really make those changes for the millions of people who depend on these essential services. And I wanted to talk through a handful examples of work that we've done in the last 10 years that has really changed those things, and that runs into the types of challenges that you all are familiar with from your work, because we are not just a company that's constantly iterating and has all of the flexibility. And so I just wanted to talk about both the opportunities and the challenges, and how some things that we have found that work in that context. So first, if you don't mind, the next slide, slide 5. Okay, everyone loves this example. A blank slate. So my first comment for government forums: a blank slate is a huge opportunity. It is not always, it is very rarely the case that you have the opportunity to really build out a government forum that isn't integrated or tied in with a pile of legacy systems. But covidtest.gov was an opportunity that we had 2 years ago to launch a website in collaboration with the US Postal Service, but that was brand new and not based on any specific tool or capability. So it was based on a capability they had, but this was something where basically Jeff Science, at the time COVID coordinator, determined that this was going to be the most appropriate way for us to get out, in his office, to get out hundreds of millions of COVID tests to the public. And because there was a blank slate about how this would be implemented, from the very beginning, we actually had the opportunity to say which agencies will have the right capabilities to do this and will make this the most intuitive experience for the public and the simplest. And the natural answer was the US Postal Service. We moved forward on building out this website and form and tool with them. And I'm going to guess that many of you used it to get tests. So I will say the statistics were that users, so that we had 8 million users in the first hour. People could fill it out in less than 5 minutes. They were able to receive free COVID tests, and it ultimately resulted in the distribution of over 740 million free tests online. And it's up now, so you could also order tests right now. But this was a huge opportunity that had the benefits that we are talking about of a blank slate. So, we were able to use the US Postal Service's capabilities to autocomplete addresses. There were problems to begin with, so not 100% of addresses registered correctly. And over time, we got that feedback and iterated. But there was no need to go connect to a legacy system. And so we were able to push everybody, including USPS, to build capabilities that would allow this to be highly responsive, effectively infinitely scalable. And we did a lot of user testing to make sure that we would build it in a way that was extremely simple and accessible for people. Next slide. Okay, here's what it did, right? It made it so that lots of people could get free tests. It also really increased trust in government's ability to implement something. So I think one thing I would like you to take away, and both Lynn and Amanda touched on this, but our ability to create excellent experiences for the public is essential for continuing and increasing trust in government's ability to execute. These sorts of interactions are foundational to what everyone experiences across their daily life. And the more that we can meet people where their expectations are, the more trust it increases. Again, we just had some really great press, which I think demonstrated the extent to which it is an outlier right now, but will not always be an outlier, thanks to work that all of you are doing to really launch this site in a way that met the public's expectations. Next slide. Okay, a few more. People found it easy. People wanted to talk about it when they found it easy. It was helpful. Next slide. All right. Blank slates are great. We don't always have a blank slate. So sometimes, in order to provide the experience that people expect, you have to do things that are not what anyone was planning or expecting. Next slide. Last year, in support of the policy decision and initiative to forgive tens of millions of people's student debt, we were asked to come and help the Department of Federal Student Aid, which is the sub-department of the Department of Education, stand up the capability to allow people to register to get their loans forgiven. And initially, the plan was to use all of the exact same machinery that people were standing up and building out for maintaining their ongoing loans. And one of the earliest things that we discovered is that there was a significant capacity constraint at the login system. So the plan was to sort of force everyone to go through their identity verification and login system, to create accounts if you didn't already have an account, because there are all these loan servicers and they each have a different system, and now this is a centralized account. There's just a very complicated set of front door needs that the agency assumed were going to be necessary in order for us to sort of meet the standard and understand who people were. And after a bit of testing, both from a user perspective and also from a technology perspective, we determined that from an experience perspective would be a major limiter, both on people's ability to engage and apply for the service that they were entitled to, and also that from a technical experience, it would have some challenges. And so we worked very hard with the agency to build out a system where we basically said, you already know all of these people. You have their loans on your books. You have lots of information about them that has just been entered in other portals. Why don't we have people fill out an extremely simple amount of information, and then we'll do the work, we'll build an algorithm to match them on the back end with their account, so that then we can build them an account dynamically instead of forcing everyone to first go create an account and then link that account with their other information, because that was going to create a massive bottleneck for us. We also, as many of you have seen and learned, rolled out in what I'll call a soft launch. We rolled out a beta, and in fact, all we ever did was a beta because it handled the volume so beautifully, and so many people signed up that we did it all through the beta. And so next slide, please. So we helped create a really simple experience. The first day that we took the beta live for 8 hours, 8 million people actually signed up. And as you can see here, people did it in 3 minutes. We didn't have scalability challenges. We had a 99% match rate on the back end, actually a little bit higher over time. And so there wasn't really that fundamental need to create that burdensome first step, but it required us to push the agency's thinking in a way that is harmonious with some of the things I was saying earlier that other parts of the world have sort of already gotten used to, right? We already know lots about you. So how do we make this a simpler experience based on the ongoing relationship and conversation that we already have in flight? How do we make this less of just a form and more of like a piece of the conversation that we're having about an interaction? Next slide. These are just like very funny quotes. Over time, 22 million people signed up for loan forgiveness. I am sad to say that they did not get their loans forgiven, but we have implemented over that. That was an incredibly important learning experience for the agency, and they brought that to bear then in all of their subsequent programs. So there's the SAVE programs and sort of a whole bunch of other additional programs that help people manage their loans and have decreased people's repayment rates. And all of those systems now have this mindset and an updated way of thinking about the forms and the ongoing interaction with the agency. I do really enjoy that New York Times cartoon. Okay, next slide. This is one of our values, and you see us say it a lot. Design with people, not for them. Next slide. You may have seen various USDS talk about this before, but I want to acknowledge that it is the week that we celebrate Veterans Day. Our work with the VA in service of veterans has been incredibly important. So now I want to talk about the work that we have done in collaboration with the VA and in creating a team at the VA. So the VA is one of our longest collaborations, and we have been working with them for almost 10 years now. And at the beginning, the VA homepage looked like the version on the left here. It was not, so veterans work with the VA every single day. They have an ongoing, not every day, but they have an ongoing interaction. The VA is a major provider of benefits, services, healthcare. And so you could have an expectation that you would be in an ongoing conversation and relationship with this agency. But this is a very formal page. It's like someone shows up that you've known forever and been working with forever, and they're in a tie and they're like introducing themselves and introducing their cousin that you don't need to know. Like it told you who the head of the agency was. It didn't have anything to do with interactions or how do I get the things that I need. So over the course of 9 years in collaboration with the VA, the team has done a tremendous amount of work to meet users where they are and to understand what people actually need and want from the agency and from their online experience. And you can see on the right where the va.gov website has evolved to and continues to evolve, which is a much more, hey, you already know us and we already know you. There's actually a login button, and we can talk about that in a minute, but it's transactional. It tells you, okay, what are you trying to do? Let me help you accomplish the things that you're actually trying to do. Every month now, 11 million veterans visit the VA website to accomplish tasks that they need to do in their interaction with the VA. And the navigation is dramatically easier over the last 9 years. This is not the only change that has been made, of course, but trust scores and engagement with the VA have gone up over 20%. So this has been tremendous and instrumental, and it comes because of an iterative process of designing with users based on their feedback, what they actually need to accomplish. Next slide. And this has been a long process. So I will add a few more examples. You know, I talked about how there were some digital forms that are maybe not taking advantage of digital forms. You can see on the left, some of the forms were quote unquote digital, but didn't actually have any dynamicism and there was no ability to adjust them. The team has worked slowly but surely over time to digitize and incorporate and integrate all of these different capabilities to really meet veterans and give them a modern experience. Next slide. You can see that we have moved from some of these truly one-way forms to a more dynamic form that walks you through the process, only shows you the questions that are relevant for you, gives you the right options and takes into account things that we already know about you. Next page. I was saying that when you have an ongoing conversation, you should use what you already know about your customer. Next slide. And so the VA has worked very hard to do that. So again, this long onerous paper form, very confusing. Now you can see at the very top of this form, which is dynamic and will only show you the questions you need, it actually suggests you, and if you log in, we will pre-fill and autofill. We can use everything that we already know about you. So acknowledging that we already have an ongoing relationship with you, and that we, you know, how do we start incorporating that into the experience and really taking advantage of the digitization of these forms. Next slide. So I didn't include it here, but the VA has also moved to build their own mobile app. And I would just note that, you know, the amount of trust and engagement that team has garnered with veterans has been an incredible process of digitizing literally hundreds of forms and incorporating them and distilling them down into fewer forms and making only asking the parts that are most relevant, right? So it is an ongoing process. And I know we're going to hear amazing stories. I think all of this is just sort of an incredible process, and it takes time. All of this is step by step, just like all engineering. The last one I will share here is a little bit of an unusual one, but I said rise above the noise. Next one. Next slide. So one last piece of work that I wanted to flag is some work that we have been doing across the country with dozens of states to help with Medicaid renewals. So at the end of the public health emergency, millions of people need to re-enroll or recertify their eligibility for Medicaid. And there are a few different avenues where we have engaged in that. Of course, again, this is a place where traditionally you would fill out a form and mail it in. Millions of people are still going to fill out a form and mail it in. What we found in a number of states and in New York State is that people were getting so much random mail from Medicaid, they didn't even think that they had to open it. And so one of the things that we suggested is even before the form, getting to the form, if you can make it an envelope so that people know that there is an important form that is essential for preventing a lapse in coverage, you will get a higher engagement rate. And so, we helped the state redesign their envelopes and add something to rise above the noise to get folks to actually engage with the form. The other thing that we have done to avoid the form is help states increase their ex parte renewal rates, which basically allows people to skip the form entirely and say, if you filled it out in the past and we know this about you and we can automatically certify what your income is based on third-party data sources, we don't force you to fill it out again. So through that work with dozens of states, at the moment, we've already renewed coverage automatically for about 2 million individuals, and we've helped prevent an additional 500,000 kids fall off coverage. So just incredibly important ways to, I just wanted to say, it doesn't have to be about the form. It can be about avoiding the form. It can be about what comes before the form, but there's just tremendous opportunities for impact as well on the things in and around this form. So in closing, I am just incredibly excited about what comes next. I have laid out a few examples of places that forms or things that are not forms or things that are around forms can dramatically improve the experience of government, can build trust in government. There are many places that I know all of you are working to roll many benefits into one form, to engage upfront with users in service of better service design. So a form plus the entire experience, increasing efficiency and allowing us to serve more individuals. There's just a tremendous opportunity to overall improve the experience of government services. And it all starts with how do we think about interacting with the public? How do we think about the exchange of information? And how can we evolve from a one-way form into a more comprehensive, bi-directional and iterative way of engaging and having a conversation that meets people where they are and takes advantage of all the technological benefits that all of you bring. So thank you so much. I'm incredibly excited to learn from all of you on the work that you've been doing. And I thank you for the improvements that you all are making and will continue to make.
Thank you, Mina. What a great start to FormFest 23. So now it's time for everyone to make some tough decisions. We have so many great sessions lined up over the next 2 hours, and you'll have to decide which ones you want to attend.
We have a break until 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern. You can take a break, stretch your legs, get some coffee, or you can head over to the networking tab on the left side of your screen and join one of our networking sessions. We've been seeing some great conversations going in the comments and chat. So if you want to keep the conversation going and make some new civic tech friends, we encourage you to head over.
And our sessions will begin promptly. So click into the session of your choice using that sessions tab on the left side of your screen. And you can hop in and out of multiple sessions as well.
And just a quick note, all sessions will be recorded and available on demand on this platform through December 15th. And then after that, Digital Service Network and Code for America will make most sessions available on YouTube.
We encourage your questions for our session speakers, and you'll be able to use the chat feature to ask them questions during those times. And again, we have built-in Q&A times during those concurrent sessions. So you can really take home the lessons that you'll be learning today back to your organizations to implement some form innovations in your own organizations. So with that, happy networking, have a great break, and we'll see you back here soon.
See you soon.